The moment soil touches your face, you understand. The world believes you guilty of sins you never committed. The coffin splinters like a scream. Margaret gasps into darkness, her lungs burning for air that tastes of pine and decay. Her hands claw against the wooden lid. Soft hands, piano player's hands, now carved with desperation. Above, the earth shifts. Footsteps retreat from the cemetery in Salem, Massachusetts, 1692. The witch trial concluded. The verdict? Execution by burial, a mercy compared to the rope. She was innocent. The irony would be beautiful if it weren't so suffocating. But something moves through the soil. Not decay, not worms. A presence ancient and deliberate, pressing downward with purpose. The coffin ruptures from above, not below, and a figure emerges from the moonlit grave like smoke taking human form. Pale hands, eyes that have witnessed centuries dissolve into dust. His coat is midnight wool, his face a sculpture of controlled sorrow. "Breathe," he commands. His voice carries the weight of centuries. Margaret claws upward, her wedding dress caked with earth and her own terror. The stranger pulls her free with strength that bends the laws of nature. She collapses onto the grass, retching soil, gasping as if born for the first time. When her vision clears, she sees him, impossibly beautiful, impossibly terrible. "Who are you?" Her voice fractures. Someone who recognized the scent of innocence being buried. He kneels, studying her with eyes that are both merciful and hungry, and someone cursed to feel every injustice the world commits. Margaret staggers backward. His skin doesn't reflect moonlight, it absorbs it. His breathing is too controlled, too deliberate. She has heard whispers of creatures that walk between dusk and dawn, creatures that feed on blood and remorse. "You're not real," she whispers, though her body knows the truth. "Neither are you to those who condemned you." He extends his hand. "They buried you because they feared what they couldn't understand. I saved you because I recognize the weight of being misunderstood." Behind them, the grave stands open like a mouth. Her name is carved on the headstone, Margaret Ashford, witch, born in sin, departed in judgment. But she is here, breathing, alive, more alive than when she walked among those who called her cursed. "My family believes me dead," Margaret says, her voice distant, hollow. "Your family believed you guilty before they knew you were guilty of anything but being born a woman with knowledge." He steps closer. His shadow falls across her like winter. "They needed a scapegoat. You were beautiful, intelligent, and alone. That made you perfect prey." Margaret looks at her hands, soil-stained, trembling. For 3 months, she had been imprisoned, interrogated, tortured by questions designed to extract confessions from someone who had committed no crime. She had watched women burn. She had heard children scream as their mothers were condemned. And when no evidence could be manufactured against her, they chose the grave instead. "What do you want from me?" she asks. "To show you that the dead sometimes inherit truths the living are too afraid to claim." He removes his coat and wraps it around her shoulders. It smells of old libraries, winter rain, and something ancient, something that predates mercy itself. "My name is Nathaniel. I have existed in the spaces between heartbeats for longer than your country has existed. I have watched humanity judge, condemn, and bury the innocent while calling it righteousness." "And you save them?" Disbelief colors her words. "I save them when I arrive in time, when the injustice hasn't already transformed them into ghosts." He kneels beside her. You were minutes from eternity, Margaret. I felt your terror through the soil, a soul so innocent it burns like a candle in absolute darkness. I couldn't let that light extinguish. Margaret meets his eyes, ancient, sorrowful, burning with something she cannot name. In them, she sees centuries of watching humans destroy each other. She sees loneliness so profound it has become a second skeleton beneath his skin. They'll search for me, she says. They'll call me the witch who rose from the dead. Let them. Nathaniel's smile is tragedy transformed into beauty. The dead have nothing left to lose. A sound echoes across the cemetery, voices, torches, the militia returning to ensure the grave held. Nathaniel extends his hand again. This time, Margaret understands that taking it means surrendering everything she was to become something the world has no name for. She takes it. They disappear into darkness as the torches crest the hill, leaving only an empty grave and the impossible truth. Margaret Ashford did not rise from the dead that night. She rose into the arms of something far stranger than death. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned. Chapter 2. The Threshold Between Hunger and Grace. The manor exists in a fold of reality that maps refuse to acknowledge. Margaret stands in a hallway lined with portraits whose eyes follow her. Centuries of faces, each one holding a secret, each one marked by transformation. Nathaniel leads her through corridors illuminated by candles that burn without consuming, their flames suspended in a perpetual twilight that might be dusk or might be the moment between life and death. How long have you lived here? She asks, her fingers trailing along velvet wallpaper that feels like skin. Time is a currency the living trade in. He opens a door to reveal a library so vast it seems to contain infinity. Books line walls that curve impossibly, their spines embossed with languages that predate empires. For me, here has always existed, before Salem, before your great-grandparents were born, before humans carved names into the earth. Margaret moves between shelves, reading titles in Latin, ancient Greek, languages she cannot identify. Her fingers pause on a leather volume, The Testament of the Damned, 1347. Another, Confessions Written in Blood, 1492. These are survival journals, Nathaniel says. His voice carries the weight of each story. Records of those who were cursed and chose to document their existence rather than surrender to despair. I keep them because forgetting would be a second death. She turns to face him. In the candlelight, he appears almost human. Shadows define his features. Mortality seems possible. Almost. But when she looks closely, she sees something else. A figure carved from centuries of choice, each decision embedding itself into his bones until he became this, beautiful and terrible and utterly alone. What am I to you? Margaret asks, the question she has avoided. Nathaniel's jaw tightens. Danger, salvation, a mirror showing me what happens when the innocent are condemned by the guilty. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He turns away. I saved you from the grave because your death would have been an obscenity. A young woman, intelligent, gentle, destroyed for being perceived as a threat by men afraid of what they couldn't control. I couldn't bear witness to another instance of that particular cruelty. But now? Margaret steps closer. Now that I'm alive? Now everything becomes complicated. Nathaniel's hands grip the edge of a mahogany desk, his fingers pressing so deeply they leave marks in the wood. I exist on blood and memory, Margaret. I sustain myself on the essence of those who choose to remain in my presence. For 3 centuries, I have lived in isolation, accepting that my hunger and my conscience could not coexist in the same body. You're afraid of yourself, Margaret realizes. I'm terrified. When he looks at her, his eyes hold genuine terror, not of her, but of what his nature demands. You smell like innocence and earth. You smell like the life I murdered centuries ago, a life I can never atone for, no matter how many graves I open. Margaret moves toward him. Her hand reaches his face. His skin is cool, unchanging, eternal. When she touches him, something shifts. His breathing becomes ragged, his control fractures. "Show me," she whispers. "You don't understand what you're asking." "I understand perfectly. I was buried alive for witchcraft I never committed. I understand being accused of sin for simply existing. If I'm to be damned anyway, let it be by choice, not by the fear of people who never knew me." Nathaniel closes his eyes. When he opens them again, there is no humanity left, only hunger, only need, only the ancient creature beneath the elegant facade. "There is no redemption for what I am," he says. "There is," Margaret counters, her voice steady. "It's called choice. You chose to save me. You chose to carry that guilt through centuries rather than surrender to the beast entirely. You're still choosing." He reaches for her hand. His grip is cold, precise, controlled. When their fingers intertwine, Margaret feels something shift in the universe. The candles flare. The portrait's eyes glow with sudden recognition. "If you stay," Nathaniel says, "you will be damned in ways you cannot yet comprehend." "I'm already damned," Margaret replies. "But at least here, in the darkness with you, I'm damned by my own choice." The library dissolves into shadow. Comment eternal if you'd trade your soul for love that heals. Chapter 3. The Ritual of Blood and Consent. The night Margaret chooses to drink is the night everything transforms. Nathaniel has prepared a chamber deep beneath the manor, a room that seems older than stone, its walls carved from some substance between marble and bone. Candlelight moves in patterns that create an illusion of breathing, and at the center stands a basin filled with wine so dark it appears to be liquid night. "This is where mortals choose," Nathaniel explains, his voice ceremonial, precise. "Not where they're forced, not where hunger decides. Here, at this threshold, you decide whether to remain human or to step into something eternally neither living nor dead." Margaret's hands tremble. For 3 days, she has felt her mortal body begin to unravel. Her heartbeat has become irregular. Her breath catches without reason. Food turns to ash in her mouth. Nathaniel's presence, his proximity, his voice, the memory of his cold skin against hers, has become the only sustenance that quiets her body's rebellion. "What happens if I don't drink?" she asks. "You return to the cemetery. I erase your memory of me, the manor, everything beyond the grave. You live out your years human, haunted by a dream you cannot quite remember. You age, you die, you find peace. And if I do, you become what I am, eternal but no longer bound to the sunrise, no longer afraid of tomorrow, no longer able to pretend you were ever truly human once you knew what your full self could become." He extends his wrist. A vein runs beneath his pale skin, faintly luminous. "But you will share my hunger. You will need what only the darkness can provide. You will be my companion in a world that has no place for creatures like us." Margaret looks at the basin, at the wine that isn't wine. She has been here before, in dreams, in the spaces between waking and sleep. She has stood at this threshold in 1,000 different forms, in 1,000 different centuries, always asking the same question: is survival worth the cost of transformation? "I want to ask you if you love me," Margaret says quietly. "But I think I already know the answer. You love what I represent, a second chance at redemption. You love the idea that saving me might offset the lives you took centuries ago." Nathaniel's expression doesn't change, but she sees the flinch, the moment her words find the truth beneath his careful composure. "Yes," he admits, "that is part of it, but not all." "What else?" "You make me remember what it felt like to be human." His voice cracks infinitesimally. "You make me believe that even creatures forged from blood and regret might deserve a second chance at grace." Margaret approaches the basin. She kneels before it as if in prayer. The surface reflects not her face, but her essence. A woman neither entirely broken nor entirely whole, suspended between what she was and what she might become. "If I do this," she says, "I need to know something. In all your centuries, have you ever loved anyone? Not needed, not wanted, not used to ease your conscience. Loved?" The question hangs in the chamber like a held breath. Nathaniel moves closer, and she hears the sound of his footsteps, deliberate, careful, as if each step requires conscious decision. "Once," he says, 230 years ago, a woman who, like you, was condemned for being too intelligent, too independent, too real. I saved her. She loved me despite what I was. She chose to become what I am. What happened? She learned that love cannot survive in a body sustained by blood alone. She learned that eternity, shared with someone who sees you as redemption rather than as a person, becomes its own kind of grave. His voice carries the weight of that failure. I held her as she chose to walk into the sunrise. I watched her burn rather than continue existing as a monument to my need for absolution. Margaret turns to face him. In this moment, she sees him clearly, not the predator, not the savior, but the lonely creature who has been carrying that death for centuries, allowing it to shape every choice, every interaction, every moment of deliberate isolation. Then I will not be her, Margaret says. I will not exist as your absolution. I will not die to ease your guilt. Then what will you be? Nathaniel asks. A choice, Margaret says, for both of us. She takes the basin in her hands. The liquid is warm, alive, thrumming with centuries of sustained existence. She drinks. The transformation is not agony. It is awakening. Every nerve becomes luminous. Every sense expands beyond mortal comprehension. She feels Nathaniel's heartbeat as if it were her own. She feels the pulse of every living thing within miles. The mice in the walls, the owls in the trees, the blood moving through the veins of the world. She looks at Nathaniel and sees him truly, not with mortal eyes, but with the perception of eternity. She sees every moment he has lived simultaneously, every choice layered upon every other choice, every death he carries visible in the architecture of his soul. I see you, she whispers. And I see you, he replies. For the first time, truly seen. They move toward each other, and in that moment, something breaks. Not Margaret, not Nathaniel, but the barrier between what they are and what they might become together. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel. and at what moments of the night they find you. Chapter 4. The Cost of Sight. Margaret wakes in the dark beneath the manor with senses that devour the world. Every heartbeat around her sings like a bell. The manor itself breathes. She can feel its age, the weight of centuries embedded in its walls like memory made solid. Nathaniel sits across from her, watching with eyes that are no longer afraid. "How long was I unconscious?" she asks. Her voice sounds different, deeper, carrying harmonics that didn't exist when she was mortal. 3 days. He moves with a grace that seems now entirely natural. Your body is integrating the change. Soon, you'll understand what you've become. Margaret stands. The chamber swims, then settles. She feels strength in her limbs that wasn't there before, not brutal, but precise, as if every muscle remembers exactly how to move with absolute efficiency. She walks to the mirror that hangs on the chamber wall. The face that returns her gaze is her own, but refined, as if someone has taken her essence and carved away everything unnecessary. Her skin holds a luminescence that catches candlelight. Her eyes are no longer brown but silver gray, ancient and knowing. "This isn't me," she whispers. "This is exactly you," Nathaniel says, "but freed from the limitations of mortality. This is what you were always meant to become." "You're lying." Margaret turns from the mirror with fury that tastes like electricity. "I was never meant to become a creature of darkness. I was meant to grow old, to have children, to tend a garden, to live a small, quiet human life. Would they have let you?" Nathaniel's question carries no judgment, only truth. The town that buried you, the people who called you witch, would they have ever permitted you to live that small, quiet life? Margaret's hands clench. She remembers the faces of those who testified against her, neighbors she had tried to help with herbal remedies, women whose jealousy transformed gratitude into accusation. She remembers the weight of the soil, the absolute certainty that she would die in darkness, unknown and unloved. "Show me," she demands. "Show me what this hunger means. Show me what I've become." Nathaniel leads her through hallways that now seem familiar, as if her new senses recognize the architecture of eternity. They emerge onto the manor grounds, and Margaret's perception explodes outward. She can smell the forest miles away. She can hear the nocturnal creatures moving through brush. She can taste the night air and understand its composition: moisture, earth, the blood of small things. "The hunger is not cruelty," Nathaniel says. "It is necessity. Everything that lives must feed. Your form simply requires sustenance that mortal bodies reject." "Animals," Margaret says, understanding dawning. "You feed on animals." Animals, yes, willing humans occasionally, those who wish to serve a purpose larger than themselves, but never the innocent, never those who cannot choose. He stops at the forest's edge. "I have lived centuries by this rule. Feed on what gives consent or starve. Choose suffering over sin." That's not survival, that's penance. Perhaps it's both. Nathaniel's smile is sad. "Come, let me show you what your senses can do when you stop resisting them." Margaret moves into the forest, and for the first time since her transformation, she stops thinking like a human woman and starts moving like what she has become. Her speed is not supernatural. It is simply the expression of eternal muscles released from mortal constraints. She hunts a deer by scent alone, not to kill but to understand. She feels its heartbeat, its fear, its desperate flight through the trees. But she stops. She does not feed. When she returns to Nathaniel, she is weeping. "I could have killed it," she says, "so easily, and I wanted to. Every fiber of my being wanted the warmth of its blood." "Yes," Nathaniel acknowledges. "Welcome to the tension that defines what we are. We can kill effortlessly. We must choose not to constantly." "How do you bear it?" "With difficulty." He leads her back to the manor. "Every night, for 300 years, I feel the hunger and choose mercy. Every night, that choice becomes slightly easier and infinitely more painful. The easiest cruelties are those we've rationalized into necessity." Back in the library, Margaret finds a journal on the desk, bound in leather that might be ancient parchment. Her journal, her handwriting, though the thoughts are not yet formed. "For those who stay," Nathaniel explains, "I ask them to write, to document their transformation, to create a record that proves we are more than appetite, that we choose meaning." Margaret opens the journal and begins to write. She writes about the taste of the night air. She writes about the terrible clarity of seeing the world without the distortions of fear. She writes about Nathaniel, not as savior, not as predator, but as a teacher showing her the weight of eternal choice. As she writes, Nathaniel disappears. She hears him in the forest above, hunting. She hears his restraint, the moment he chooses to release the deer unharmed, to feel the hunger unsatisfied. She understands finally that his penance is not punishment, it is love. Like if you believe even monsters deserve a second chance. Chapter 5. The Architecture of Memory. On the night of the new moon, Nathaniel shows Margaret his history. They descend to a chamber she has not yet discovered, carved deeper into the earth than the transformation room, older than the manor itself. The walls are lined with mirrors, but these mirrors do not reflect the present. They reflect moments suspended in time, scenes from centuries past, memories made visible. "This is where I come when isolation becomes unbearable," Nathaniel says. "This is where I keep everyone I've loved and lost." In the first mirror, Margaret sees a woman in 15th century dress, her hair red as flame. She is laughing, reaching toward a younger Nathaniel whose face still holds some capacity for joy. "Isabella," he says. "She was a mathematician's daughter. She taught me that logic and love are not opposites, that a creature of eternal night might still solve equations about infinity." In the next mirror, a man, perhaps 30 years old, with kind eyes. He wears the uniform of a revolutionary, standing with Nathaniel on a barricade in Paris. "Michel, he showed me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. He taught me that even creatures like me can believe in justice. Mirror after mirror, each one a love story interrupted by death or departure. Each one a wound that has never fully healed." "Why do you show me this?" Margaret asks. "Because you need to understand that loving someone like me is a transaction with death." Nathaniel's voice is steady, but carrying undertones of ancient grief. "Everyone I've loved has either aged and died while I remained unchanged, or they've been transformed like you, and eventually realized that eternity is too long to spend in the shadow of someone else's guilt." "What if it doesn't have to be?" Margaret moves closer to the mirrors. "What if you're not doomed to repeat that pattern?" "Then you would be the first person in 3 centuries to find a way to break it." Margaret reaches out and touches one of the mirrors. The image shifts. It is not a memory, but a possibility. She sees herself and Nathaniel, centuries in the future, sitting together in a library much like the one above. She sees them not as separate entities bound by hunger and redemption, but as two people who have learned to exist together without consuming each other. "That's not real," she whispers. "It's a possibility," Nathaniel says. "Nothing more. The future is written in choices we haven't yet made." "Then let's make different choices." Margaret turns to face him directly. "I don't want to be your redemption. I don't want to be your second chance. I want to be your equal, a woman who loved you at your worst and chose you anyway, not despite what you are, but because of it." Nathaniel's expression fractures. For a moment he appears not immortal, but entirely human, vulnerable, desperate, wanting to believe. "You don't know me yet," he says. "Your transformation is only days old. You're still intoxicated by the novelty of eternity. When the centuries begin to pass, when you've lived 100 years and watched 1,000 mortals age and die, you'll understand. The hunger doesn't fade. The loneliness only deepens." "Then teach me." Margaret reaches for his hands. "Teach me everything you've learned about surviving eternity. Teach me how to love someone in the darkness without losing myself. Teach me how to make eternity mean something other than endless penance." Nathaniel pulls her close. When he speaks, his voice carries centuries of longing. "If you're wrong," he says, "I will have condemned another innocent to my curse." "If you're wrong," Margaret counters, "you'll have damned yourself to another century of running from love. I'm choosing this, all of it. The hunger, the darkness, you. But only if you choose me, not as salvation, not as redemption, but as a partner." They stand together in that chamber of mirrors, surrounded by the ghosts of every love Nathaniel has mourned. And then, slowly, the mirrors begin to change. The old images fade. In their place, new reflections appear, Margaret and Nathaniel, building something neither had dared imagine. Not happy, exactly. Happiness is a mortal luxury, but real, chosen, true. Follow for more immortal confessions born from blood and mercy. Chapter 6. The night they were hunted. The hunters arrive on the new moon with fire and conviction. They come from Salem, a group of men who have noticed the impossible. A woman they buried 3 months ago appears unchanged in a village 50 miles north. They come with torches, with crosses fashioned from wood, with the absolute certainty that they are righteous. Nathaniel is hunting when they arrive. Margaret, alone in the library, hears them first, the disturbance in the night like a stone dropped into still water. She moves upward through the manor with a speed that is now natural, emerging on the grounds just as the first torch touches the eastern wall. "Fire won't kill me," Margaret says quietly, "but it will hurt. That's why you came, isn't it? Not to destroy what I've become, but to punish what you believe I always was." The lead hunter, a man named Whitmore, who testified against her 3 months ago, lowers his rifle. Behind him, a dozen others with weapons and certainty carved into their faces. "Witch," he hisses, "you rose from the grave to exact vengeance. We see it now. We knew it then." "You knew nothing." Margaret moves forward, and the hunters fall back instinctively, sensing something in her that their guns cannot defend against. "You convicted me of witchcraft because I read books. You condemned me because I was alone. You buried me because you were afraid of a woman who would not break." She could kill them. Her new form makes it effortless. She could drain them, transform them, bury them so deep the earth would need centuries to return their bones. The hunger sings in her blood, urging her to violence, to retribution, to the poetic justice of turning their tools against them. She does not. Instead, Nathaniel emerges from the forest behind them, and the hunters turn, suddenly aware they are not facing one creature, but two. "Leave this place," Nathaniel says, his voice carrying the weight of 300 years of command. "Return to Salem. Tell them that Margaret Ashford is neither witch nor ghost. Tell them she is mercy made manifest, the only reason I have not exacted the price for her innocent blood." "You're the demon," Whitmore gasps. "You're the devil who corrupted her." "Yes," Nathaniel agrees calmly. "I am every devil you've imagined, every dark thing you've feared, and I am choosing not to annihilate your species for its cruelty. That is not damnation. That is grace." He moves forward, and the hunters scatter like leaves before wind. They run back toward their horses, dropping torches, abandoning righteousness when confronted with a power that transcends their understanding. When they're gone, Margaret stands in the ashes of the torches, trembling. "I wanted to kill them," she whispers. "I know." Nathaniel approaches carefully, as if afraid she might shatter. "But you didn't. That's not weakness, Margaret. That's the strength to resist your own nature." "What if I can't always resist? What if the hunger overwhelms me eventually?" "Then you'll fail," Nathaniel says. "And you'll live with that failure. And you'll try again tomorrow." That's what eternity means. Infinite chances to be less than what you're capable of becoming, and infinite chances to choose differently. They return to the manor, but something has shifted. The hunter's fire has burned away the last vestige of Margaret's mortal innocence. She is no longer a victim rescued from a grave. She is a predator choosing mercy. She is eternal darkness choosing light. It is infinitely more terrifying. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. Chapter 7. The Mirror in the Dark. Margaret discovers the truth about transformation 6 months after her death and rebirth. She finds it in a hidden chamber behind the library, a room Nathaniel has never mentioned. Inside, a table bears objects arranged like artifacts in a museum: a wedding ring, a daguerreotype of a young couple, a journal bound in leather so ancient it crumbles at touch. She reads her predecessor's words, Day 847 of eternity. "The hunger no longer frightens me. It is simply part of my existence, like breathing once was." But today I caught Nathaniel watching me sleep. There was such longing in his expression, not hunger, not desire, but the ache of someone who realizes that love cannot bridge the gap between eternal and mortal perception. We are forever separated by the fact that I will never age beside him. I will never grow old. I will never die naturally. I will become, as the centuries pass, a living memorial to his inability to let go. Day 1, 203. I have begun to understand why he was so desperate to save me. It wasn't love at first. It was recognition. The recognition that in saving me, he might save himself. But I cannot be his salvation. I am not his redemption. And the longer I exist in this manner, sustaining myself on the blood of animals, carrying his guilt like a second skeleton, the more I understand that I am no longer free. I have simply exchanged one cage, the grave, for another. Day 1, 8-97. I am going to leave him tomorrow. I will walk into the sunrise. It will hurt beyond measure, but not as much as this slow extinction of self. I cannot save him. No one can. The only salvation available to creatures like us is acceptance that we are irredeemable, and that living anyway is the only sin worth committing. Margaret reads these words in silence, while Nathaniel, unaware, hunts in the forest above. She understands finally the weight he carries. She understands that loving him is not simple redemption, but a constant negotiation with the darkest parts of her own nature. She does not rage at him. She does not feel betrayed. Instead, she does something more terrifying. She accepts. She accepts that she will never be fully human again. She accepts that she will carry hunger and darkness as long as she exists. She accepts that Nathaniel will always carry the guilt of transforming her, and that no amount of love can erase that burden. But she also understands something his previous loves did not. Acceptance is not surrender. It is a choice to exist in the tension between what she is and what she wishes to be, without requiring that tension to resolve itself into peace. When Nathaniel returns to the manor, Margaret confronts him with her predecessor's journal. "You kept her words," Margaret says. "All these years, you kept the record of her suffering and never told me." "I should have," Nathaniel replies. There is no defensiveness in his voice, only exhausted acceptance. "I should have warned you that loving me is a path to slow dissolution, that I am incapable of being what you need." "You're right," Margaret says. "You are. But that's not why I'm staying." "Then why?" "Because I don't need you to be my redemption," Margaret explains. "And I don't want you to be my savior. I want you to be what you actually are, a creature carved from guilt and hunger who has chosen for 3 centuries to endure rather than destroy. That's not noble. It's not romantic. It's simply the most human thing about you." She reaches out and takes his hand. His skin is cold, unchanging, eternal. "I will not be her," Margaret continues. "I will not dissolve slowly. I will not wait for a sunrise that will never come. Instead, I will become what she could not. Someone who loves you while fully understanding what you are, and who loves herself enough to demand that love be a partnership, not a rescue operation." Nathaniel's expression shifts. For a moment, he looks not like an immortal creature, but like a man tasting hope for the first time in centuries. "I'm terrified," he says. "Good," Margaret replies. "That means you're finally awake." They return together to the library, to the infinite collection of stories and secrets, and for the first time in 300 years, Nathaniel allows himself to believe that eternity might be something other than punishment. Comment, eternal, if you'd survive the night for someone worth dying for. Chapter 8. The Choice Between Darkness and Dawn. On the anniversary of her burial, Margaret stands at the manor's highest tower and looks out at the world she has left behind. A year ago, she was innocent and mortal. Today, she is eternal and guilty. Guilty of the hunger she has indulged, the mortals she has tempted, the power she has accumulated with each passing month. She is no longer the victim buried in Salem. She is the predator that crawled out of the grave. Nathaniel joins her at the tower's edge, and they stand together in that space between night and dawn, the hour when immortal things are forced to make decisions about how to continue existing. "Do you regret it?" Nathaniel asks. "Choosing me? Choosing this?" Margaret considers the question with the seriousness it deserves. "I regret that I had to be buried alive to understand who I was," she says finally. "I regret that becoming immortal required dying first, but I don't regret choosing eternity with you." "You could leave," Nathaniel says. "You could walk into the dawn like my other loves did. You could find peace in the ending rather than continuing in this endless negotiation with darkness." "I could," Margaret agrees, "but I won't." She takes his hand, and they watch the horizon as the first light begins to creep across the sky. The manor's stones begin to glow, preparing for the day when neither of them can walk in the sun. "Here's what I believe," Margaret says. "I believe that every immortal was once someone who chose not to die. I believe that's not a curse. It's a revolution. I believe that we get to decide what eternity means. We get to decide whether we're monsters or whether we're simply beings navigating a world that wasn't designed for creatures like us." "And what have you decided?" Nathaniel asks. "That I'm going to write new journals," Margaret says. "Not for your collection of dead loves, but for the future. I'm going to document what it means for two damaged, eternal beings to build something together. Not redemption, not rescue, but genuine partnership." "That could take centuries to accomplish," Nathaniel says. "I know," Margaret replies. "That's the only gift eternity gives us, unlimited time to keep trying." They turn from the window and descend the tower together, moving away from the approaching dawn toward the depths of the manor, toward the library, toward the infinite possibility that two creatures forged from darkness and desperate hope might actually find something worth existing forever to protect. The graves they escaped remain open in the cemetery, monuments to the women they were and the beings they've chosen to become. Behind them, the sun rises over Salem, indifferent to the impossible love growing in the shadows. Margaret sits at the library desk and opens a fresh journal. She writes, "Day 1. The rest of my eternity begins now, not as a victim of circumstance, not as a monument to someone else's guilt, but as a woman who chose the darkness and decided to make it mean something. The hunger remains, the loneliness persists, but so does the choice. Every night I will choose this life, this man, this impossible love. And if I fail, if the darkness eventually wins, at least I will have tried. I am neither living nor dead. I am neither damned nor redeemed. I am simply me, Margaret, eternal and aware, writing my own story in a language darkness understands. The witches who came before me were innocent, but I am guilty, fully and completely, and I wear that guilt like a crown. It is the most free I have ever been. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned, like if you'd choose eternity for love that sees your soul. Comment eternal if you'd survive the night for someone worth dying for. Follow for more immortal confessions born from blood and mercy. Because we are here in the spaces between heartbeats, writing our own mythology. We are the ones who refused to die, the ones who chose to become something other than what the world demanded. We are the eternal testament to the power of choosing, repeatedly, to love despite everything, and if the world calls us monsters, let them. At least we know exactly what we are. Femme.